Hormones really direct us towards our personal optimal health and performance. So hormones direct the expression of the DNA, which proteins to produce when. And that is why hormones are absolutely fundamental and key to all aspects of our health, because the great news is that our hormones are affected by what we choose to do in our life. Because these amazing hormones we've been talking about, when do they spring into action? Actually, when we're asleep. So if you have fed and watered them and given them some exercise during the day, fitter and healthier when you're asleep. The two main stimuli for growth hormone are
Hey there, welcome to the Happy Habit Podcast. I'm Matthew. I'm here every week talking all things health, well-being and self-improvement. If you enjoyed this episode or have enjoyed any of the previous episodes, show your support, like, subscribe and tell other people about this podcast. In today's episode, I speak with Dr Nicky Keay. She is the author of Hormones, Health and Human Potential. We find out why hormones are so important to our overall health. How do you naturally increase the production of that vital human growth hormone? And we hear about the relationship between our hormones and our DNA, plus the steps women and men can take to maximise the harnessing of their hormones at every stage of life. Dr. Keay, you're very welcome to the podcast. Your book is called Hormones, Health and Human Potential. Can you tell us at the outset, very broadly, why hormones are so important?
Well, your hormones really direct us towards our personal optimal health and performance. So performance, I'm meaning in athletic terms and whatever you're trying to achieve in life. So what evidence do I have? What I've just said is correct, true? Because how do hormones work? Hormones direct the expression of our DNA. So DNA, the blueprint for life we all have. But have you ever wondered? I did, obviously. How does that DNA, sort of transform itself into who we are and, our health? And the answer is the hormones. The hormones direct the expression of the DNA, which proteins to produce when. And that is why hormones are absolutely fundamental and key to all aspects of our health, not just physical health, but of course mental health as well. This is great news. Because the great news is that our hormones are affected by what we choose to do in our life. And Hippocrates indeed said this 2,000 years ago. He said if we could give each individual just the right amount of nourishment, just the right amount of exercise, we would have found the surest way to health. I mean, his statement is absolutely correct, just as it was 2,000 years ago. But of course, he didn't have the benefit of knowing what that connection is between our lifestyle choices effectively and our health. But I'm telling you today, update, 2,000 years later from Hippocrates, we know it's the hormones that are this missing link, because the hormones are directly impacted through what we choose to do. And this is great news. This is really positive, I think, message that we can harness our hormones. We can do a lot to direct our gene expression and our health via the action of our hormones, because it's the choice of what we have to do. For us as individuals, it will be slightly different for each individual. But that's the gist of why hormones are so important, and you should love and respect them.
Do you think we undervalue or underappreciate the power and the implications and the effects of hormones on our health overall? And I'm not just talking about regular people, but medics too.
Well, I would say probably, yes. The truth is that hormones are really complicated. And also the other thing is that hormones are this intangible thing. Although they're so important, like I've just explained, you can't see them, you can't feel them, you don't really know what they're doing. You feel you haven't got literally a handle on them. So, but this is why I love hormones, because I love detective work. I like it that hormones have this action throughout our body. Literally from the top of our head to our toe tips, all the organs in the body are affected by hormones. So I think that's why, maybe because they have got this vast range of action, and because they are this invisible thing, that's probably why, in general terms, people, haven't really sort of appreciated them, like you say, or delved into them. Because once you do, it's like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of them. They're really complicated, and they all have their own rhythms and everything. So it is super complicated. But like I've just said, I love complicated. I love, teasing out, seeing what's going on. So I think that's probably, historically why. And also, hormones were sort of discovered or appreciated, measured relatively recently, So I think this is why we're getting more and more understanding, information. And this is one of the reasons, of course, I wrote the book, because I wanted to highlight that, not just to, to doctors, but to people in general, and give them the tools and the understanding about harnessing their hormones.
Well, let's echo Hippocrates there and dive deeper into nutrition and into our behaviours. How do we harness those hormones? You like complicated things. I like simple things. So can we simplify how we can harness those powerful hormones?
Well, absolutely. By the way, I like complicated, but absolutely we have to have a message to the, like, what is it that we can do? And actually, let's go to what Hippocrates said. Let's talk about nutrition. Let's talk about what is the best. I don't like the word diet because it makes it sound like it's, very rigid. So, but on the other hand, nutrition, it's like, eating, it is the fundamentals of eating a wide range of covering all the food groups, protein, carbohydrate, etc. And also the timing of when we eat is really important, because I've mentioned that hormones have their own personal clocks, biochronometers, as we say. And so you want to try and harmonize with those, with when you're eating. And I think why things have become confusing, because that's a very simple concept, like eat a range of foods, eat them at a sort of decent time. My grandmother always used to say 3 meals a day, and lo and behold, she was right? Really keeping it actually quite simple. But I think sometimes we do try and overcomplicate it, because we're flooded with all these messages about this diet, that diet, don't eat this, do eat that. It gets really, really confusing. And so I think actually people, if they just sort of refocus on what the fundamental thing is you need to do, and you need to fuel according to what you need, fuel for the work required. If you're a very active person, you're doing lots of, training, exercise, then of course you're going to need to eat more than someone who is actually got more sedentary lifestyle. So that's the other thing. I think we look at other people and say, oh, well, they're eating that, or this celebrity's eating that, and that's what we should do. So nutrition, just keep it straightforward and keep it regular. That's what hormones really love, by the way, that you respect their timekeeping. So that's the nutrition side. So that's pretty straightforward. And then the other thing is the exercise. If I have to be honest, if like me, you hate going to the gym, I don't like it at all, right? Don't let that be a put off. By exercise, it's whatever you enjoy, because what you enjoy doing, you're more likely to stick to it. You see, that's the thing, right? For me, it's going to ballet class, right? I also like swimming, I like cycling. So, whatever the things are you enjoy, and ideally a range of things, not always just doing one thing. But backing that up with activity in general. Unfortunately, especially during COVID, we're all sitting down looking at our computers, and it's very inactive. So, but even if you have got a more sort of static job, if I can put it that way, make sure you're breaking that up and walking around and moving, in addition to doing a type of exercise you really like. So that's sort of quite straightforward for the exercise, trying to cover things you like doing, but also, covering all the different types of exercise. Just there are different types of food groups, there are different types of exercise groups. So we have cardiovascular exercise, okay, so getting out of breath effectively. We also have strength type exercise, where it's more, can be just resistance, doesn't have to be free weights. Flexibility is another important aspect, and just sort of coordination and balance. So if you can, cover all those aspects, just like you're covering all the food groups, you're covering all those aspects of fitness, then you won't be going far wrong. And the third thing I would add, because I like you, I do like simple things, and also things always comes in threes. The other thing is sleep, because, to quote from Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth, sleep is the chief nourisher in life's great feast. Because these amazing hormones we've been talking about, when do they spring into action? Actually, when we're asleep. So if you have, fed and watered them and given them some exercise during the day, actually you get fitter and healthier when you're asleep. So don't skimp on sleep is the other thing. And another thing my grandmother used to say, try and go to bed before midnight. Again, she was so right. We have a paper recently saying, yes, it is actually, trying to have a regular bedtime. Of course, one wants to go out now and then, but just trying to have a regular bedtime, getting in bed before midnight where at all possible, that will sort of help sync all those biochronometers and keep the hormones happy.
Okay, so we've looked at 3 pillars to help us harness the power of our hormones. Can we identify some of those hormones? Because people will be familiar with one, for example, human growth hormone.
Growth hormone, it's not just about growing in children, just to make that clear, right? Of course, it is. There's a big spike of that when you're young and you're growing. But even as adults, growth hormone is really important to maintain our body composition. So favours muscle over fat deposition, for example. So yeah, growth hormone is an anabolic hormone in that sense. It builds up muscle, so that's good. And so that's an example of one. And guess what? It follows the pattern that the 2 main stimuli for growth hormone are, yes, exercise and sleep. And literally its peak of growth hormone is, about midnight, well, basically nighttime when you're asleep, right? So to favour the production of growth hormone, which you definitely want for good body composition, then you do your exercise and you eat your regular meals during the day, and then you actually get fitter and healthier when you're asleep, and that is to a great extent driven by growth hormone. So that's that's an important hormone.
When you're talking about body composition here, are we talking about higher levels of muscle content and lower levels of visceral fat?
Correct, exactly. So I mean, there are different types of fat, but the sort of not so healthy one, that's the visceral fat, which goes around the organs and things. And everyone knows about muscle, skeletal muscle. So we do need some fat on our bodies, right? Of course. But it's when the balance tips over, especially actually as we get older, because the growth hormone is going lower. So you really want to, be eating in a regular way, like we discussed, and doing our exercise. But it becomes even more important to really nail that as you get older, like me, because then your growth hormone is going to be a bit lower anyway as you get older. So you need to give it every single opportunity it can. So that's when exercise, and including strength work, and including more protein in your diet, this will all help your growth hormone to work its magic for you.
And is it true you helped to invent or come up with an anti-doping test for growth hormone?
Yes. Well, you see, the thing is, I've just told you the secrets of growth hormone, and unscrupulous athletes, and indeed doctors, have known this. They know. You said, people don't understand. Well, athletes do understand this, that growth hormone is a really important fitness hormone, I suppose you could say, anabolic hormone. And so in general, hormones are very helpful for performance, but you can stimulate their production through your training and your nutrition. But if you're an unscrupulous athlete and want to cheat and cut corners, then of course the attraction is to take that hormone like neat, so you don't have to go through all the training and everything, or boost it as well. And in fact, 75% of adverse analytical findings by WADA, World Anti-Doping Authority, those are hormone doping offences. And indeed, growth hormone was for a time the choice, because growth hormone has got a very short, what we call half-life, right? And so it will disappear from the bloodstream quite quickly. And also what you can, in the growth hormone that you inject externally, that's the same. It looks exactly the same as what you produce yourself. So it was actually pretty tricky to come up with the doping test of measuring the hormone, and actually how you're going to distinguish that wasn't truly because someone was training a lot. And so, several years ago now, as part of the international medical team, we were tasked with finding or developing an anti-doping test for these athletes that are, cheating, but also there's a serious element to it. All the things on the WADA ban list, of course, it's cheating, number one, because you're trying to take a shortcut, but actually it's mainly for the adverse health effects, because the mentality is, growth hormone is, that's great, I want more and more of it. So, but too much of anything, including hormones, is a bad thing. And we know this from medicine in people who have a medical condition and overproduce growth hormone, right? Actually, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. It kind of makes sense. And so that's why WADA has this spanned list, because yes, it's cheating, but actually also with the view for the health of the athlete.
It's extraordinary the lengths that people go to in order to eke out that 1% of an advantage over their competitors. But as you say, we should really be leaving the body to do what it does best and allow it to produce its own human growth hormone itself.
Right, exactly, of course, because as you say, the body knows best. The hormones will adapt to what you give them, in terms of training and nutrition. That's obviously the best way to do it. But, obviously some athletes, Lance Armstrong, for example, and others, have, cheated and looked for shortcuts to win. So, yeah, of course, we understand and appreciate athletes, of course, competitive. They want to win and want to get that every little bit they can. But but that's why we have to have a limit. Otherwise, ultimately, for the health of the athlete, if they're injecting themselves with all sorts of stuff, then the body, as you say, the body knows best, not you. So let the hormones do their thing,
We've been talking about training, and by virtue of the complexity of women's reproductive systems and all of the hormones that go along with that, for active women, do they have to contend with so much more, especially if they're looking to optimize their performance?
Yeah, well, I would agree with you that out of all the hormone systems in the body, in my opinion, the most beautiful one, amazing choreography, is that of the menstrual cycle. The hormones, I think everyone's seen those sorts of graphs where you see the hormones fluctuate over the menstrual cycle, and also only do they fluctuate over the menstrual cycle, throughout a woman's life they will change. The female hormone odyssey, as I call it. When menstrual cycle starts, that's obviously a big step change. By the way, women might get pregnant. That's another change. They might take hormonal contraception, which kind of messes it up a little bit in that sense. And then, of course, ultimately, as they get older, they reach menopause when they retire. So not only have they got to bear in mind that our hormones are fluctuating, but also over their life, it will change. So yeah, well, there is a little bit more of a challenge for women, but we're up to it, right? We're equal to it. And so the thing I would recommend for women, whatever level of athlete or exerciser you are, to be positive about your menstrual cycle. So I think that's the other thing. There's so much negative talk about it. Oh, it's a nuisance, it's a pain, I feel worse, everything like this. And yes, it's true, there can be some tricky moments, but ultimately, these hormones are also really helpful for your health and your performance. Like estradiol is actually another of those bodybuilding anabolic hormones, you see, and really important for bone health, for example. And we know that athletes whose periods stop, or they take hormonal contraception that maybe suppresses all the hormones, they're going to be more at risk of injuries, bone stress injuries, things like this. So my message is be positive about your hormones, and also, be inquisitive for yourself. Be your own personal detective. Track your cycle, how you personally feel over the cycle. What are the modifications you need to make to perform to your best throughout the cycle? That is really my key message. I'm a medical advisor to Scottish Ballet, and that's the approach we have. That, in advance of the opening night of Swan Lake, the dancers will know what they're familiar with their own cycle. They can predict where they might be in their cycle come that opening night. We can't change opening night, that's fixed in the diary, but you can be as prepared as you can for that opening night or the competition if you're an athlete. So, athletes, I've got a whole family of cyclists. So, for example, I know they're very fastidious about the bike setup, the what they're going to wear, is the bike shoes good, the helmet, etc. But actually sometimes we overlook actually the most important element of this. You yourself, your body, how is that? And if you're a female athlete, being having made all those preparations for where you're going to be in your menstrual cycle when the competition comes, that's certainly going to help.
Does nutrition and supplementation come into this for women too? I'm talking about supplementation with iron, for example, for women who are menstruating.
For sure. I mean, not every single woman will need to, but if you have a particularly heavy period and you're training hard, then your iron stores might be a bit low. The other thing that everybody should be taking, men and women, is vitamin D, because we can get most of the food, or all the vitamins and minerals from food, but the exception is vitamin D, because it's a strange one. The main source of that is the sunlight, or the action of sunlight on your skin. And living in the UK, well, need I say more? And vitamin D is really important for both bone health, muscle recovery, interestingly, and immunity. So if you're not doing it so already, top tip with that performance improvement, vitamin D is an easy win, and it's not banned. It's legal, all that rest of thing. And also it's been shown to be helpful for women, especially during the luteal phase. So that's after ovulation with premenstrual issues. Actually, there's good evidence from the Royal College of Obstetrics and Gynecology. They say, actually, again, simple self-help is vitamin D. So in terms of supplements, specifically for the menstrual cycle, maybe iron, or keeping an eye on what's going on there if you're particularly tired, heavy bleeding. But definitely vitamin D will help you in the premenstrual phase. And probably you will, and the other thing is you will need a slightly more energy overall in the luteal phase, so after ovulation when progesterone is high, because it raises metabolic rate. So don't feel guilty that you're feeling more hungry than usual, and predict that. And having an extra banana, that's sensible, rather than waiting until you're really ravenous and then you grab something that maybe isn't so helpful. So I think there are something self-help things, if you will, or supplements or nutritional things to bear in mind over the menstrual cycle. Yeah.
Something that affects both sexes will be the hormone cortisol, the stress hormone. Could you talk to us about the negative implications of cortisol? Because I know you're not a fan of HIIT, the high intensity interval training, because of the production of larger amounts of cortisol. But how can cortisol be of a benefit, and how can cortisol work against both men and women at times?
Sure. Well, cortisol, it's kind of like flight or fight hormone, part of that. And so we definitely need cortisol, and it sort of shows a variation over the day. We're talking about hormones having their own personal stop clocks, or whatever you want to call them. And so cortisol is very important. When we wake up, there's a cortisol awakening response. So it goes relatively high in the morning. So it gives you the get up and go and, carry on with your day, or whatever that is. And then it tends to go lower at night. So in terms of, so you definitely, all the hormones are useful, but it's like everything, provided that you treat them nicely, and provided you do what you're doing to try and coordinate with that. So the high intensity training, it's not that I'm against it, but the problem is if you do that exclusively, number one, hormones don't like just one look of one type of exercise. That's the first thing. And also it's when you do this, like we said, when. And what I do come across is that some people are doing really this high intensity first thing in the morning when they wake up, and sometimes even fasted without fuel. Now, if you think about that, your cortisol's already high. Now you're going to make it even higher with high intensity, and also it's going to be higher because you're doing it in a starved state. So that's why breakfast is called breakfast, because you're breaking your fast. You've had an overnight fast. So actually, it's really super important to, if you do want to do high intensity, and I understand the schedule might be with your, that you do have, that's the only time you can do it, early in the morning. You have to do, that's it. So that's okay, provided you've taken on board some sort of fuel before you do that exercise, and also that you refuel afterwards appropriately. Otherwise, the cortisol will get too high, and that's when it starts to flip over to being unhelpful. And by the way, I do appreciate, I used to be a competitive swimmer for my sins. And yeah, we had to be poolside every single morning at 6 a.m., right? Calm, rain and shine and all that. And yeah, I had to get up at 5:15 to have personally, I had a small portion of cereal, but whatever it is. And then, go and train. So yeah, I know it's an extra thing, because people say, I don't have time, I need to go and train. It's like, well, you kind of have to make time. So it's all about, it goes down to this timing, doesn't it? Coordinating everything. So cortisol is a great hormone. But again, like the whole message of what we've been talking, work with it. And if you are doing high intensity and you have to do it in the morning for logistical reasons, okay, but make sure that you've had some sort of complex carb before you do the exercise.
It's really interesting because I tend to either swim, cycle or run first thing in the morning, and I do so on an empty stomach, so I'll have to redress that imbalance. Can you talk to us about what REDS is?
Yeah, so REDS stands for Relative Energy Deficiency in Sport. And effectively, it means there's a mismatch between your energy requirement, your energy demand, and the energy in your energy intake. And that's why it's important to stress relative. So if you're eating a certain amount of food and you're not that active, that's okay. But if you're very active and you eat the same amount of food as, your friend who isn't active, now you're relatively speaking going to be in energy deficiency, you see. So that's the essence of what's going on, what REDS is, right? You're not fueling enough for the work. You're not fueling for the work required sufficiently, you see. And so, the odd time of energy deficiency is okay. The hormones can cope with that. Like I was at a meeting this morning and actually it went on longer as usual as meetings do. And so I was in slight energy deficiency because it meant I had to have a very late lunch. So that's a slight, but it's a mini energy deficiency. And I realized that and I quickly ate my lunch and, I'm good. So if that happens once in a while, that's okay. But it's if an athlete specifically or an exerciser is chronically in energy deficiency. So day after day, week after week, month after month, there isn't enough energy in the system to fuel what they're trying to do. That's when you develop REDS. And so what's REDS? So it goes back to the hormones again. The hormones adapt to what you do. So if you're kind to your hormones and you give them sufficient nutrition, it basically, if you do what Hippocrates says, give them sufficient nutrition and the training and all that, that's all good. But if you don't feed your hormones, literally, then the hormones will have to respond and adapt. They have to look for ways to save energy. Your body looks for ways to save energy, go into eco mode. If you're driving your car and, when the indicator shows you've got low in petrol, what's your reaction? You slow down, right, till you get to the next petrol station. So your body will slow down, so the hormones will start to go low. Oh, but hold on a second. We just said that hormones are really important for driving the positive adaptations to exercise. So it won't happen immediately, right? But gradually over time, then actually your exercise performance will start to decline. And also it's the adverse health effects. So for example, in a female athlete, periods will often stop. So now we have low levels of the anabolic hormone estradiol, much more prone to bone stress injuries. Same for men. Testosterone will start to go low because you're looking for ways to save energy, you see. And then again, they're also more at risk of injuries. So that's, in a nutshell, what REDS is, a relative energy deficiency. And also to stress, it can happen in men and women. And it can happen at any level and any age of exerciser. I see a lot of teenage athletes who are doing crazy amounts of training like an adult, and they've got activity in school, and they need a lot of energy for the brain, and they can end up in, so it can be youngsters, but equally at the other end of the spectrum, I see a lot of masters athletes who are frustrated because they see the consequences of declining growth hormone, for example, right? And it's like, oh, I've got a little bit more, fat than I want to carry and I'm getting slower. Oh, maybe I should restrict what I'm eating because that will help. But then again, they end up in relative energy deficiency. So I want to stress it can happen at any age. You don't have to be an elite athlete for this to happen. In fact, I think it's more likely if you're an amateur. If you're an elite on one of these, I'm watching the Tour de France at the minute. If you're on one of these teams, I can assure you they are measuring everything to the nth degree, right? To make sure they are having the right amount of nutrition. But if you're an amateur, then you're not, haven't got all that backup. And so it can be relatively easy in that sense to slip into REDS.
So really people's desire to maximize their performance in this context is counterproductive because they're overextending themselves. They're doing too much training. They're not getting the right nutrition. They're not getting sufficient rest. And in the end, they end up going backwards.
Exactly. So, initially you might feel that you're doing the right thing. And initially, because the cortisol will go up, by the way, because you're really stressing the body, and the cortisol buzzes, makes you buzz. And so initially, the person will think that it's working. But then, as you say, then they will see it not working. And so they interpret that, I need to try harder, I need to exercise more, I need to restrict more. So it becomes a real vicious circle, you see. So, and also the thing is that on the other hand, it's true. We have to accept that there is unfortunately an obesity epidemic, And so lots of the messages out there are about don't eat so much, cut out carbs, carbs are evil. You look at a slice of bread and you balloon and all this sort of thing. So there's a lot of mixed messages there, but you have to kind of be strong and do what's right for you. And if you eat a slice of bread before you go swimming early in the morning, I can assure you that will make you swim better. That will give you the energy. If you're going to use it up, that's fine, right? Rather than trying to do it in low energy state, because the positive hormones driving the adaptations will dampen down, but the cortisol will go up, and cortisol favors the deposition of fat. So you see, it's counterproductive.
What are your thoughts about the term adrenaline junkie? These people who tend to engage in an activity or an exercise to an obsessive extent because of that feeling they feel in the moment, but end up possibly overtraining as a result.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that, because we discuss overtraining syndrome and REDS like they're totally different things. Like one is you're not fueling enough, the other is you're exercising too much. But actually, if you think about it, from what I've described about the energy, balance, deficit, they kind of overlap a lot. So even if you're eating sufficiently, but you're training like heck, like you say, you're burning through all that energy. And you'll still be overstressing the body. Cortisol still tend to go too high, right? So there's a real overlap. And also if you're the personality type that is quite driven, then it could even be you've got a double whammy. You're quite restrictive and strong and no, I'm not eating that slice of bread. And also it's like, I've got to go and train even if I'm feeling exhausted or injured. So exercise dependence. So the personality that does one of those things could well be doing the other. So again, it's one of those sort of combined effects. So, I love exercise, but remember, you do need at least one rest day a week, and you do need that light and shade, because if you overdo it, you're not giving your hormones the breathing space to drive positive adaptation. So again, it becomes a vicious circle. You're not being lazy. Having a rest day is actually essential if you really want to achieve, and you'll enjoy your exercise even more.
There you go. Common sense advice, echoing your granny and Hippocrates. Get plenty of rest, get your 3 meals a day, get your nutrition, and listen to your body. What we will do is we'll pop a link to the book in the show notes for this episode. But for the moment, Dr. Nicky Keay, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. Really enjoyed listening to you today.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Happy Habit podcast. If you enjoyed it, if you got any value at all from this, or indeed any of the previous episodes, show your support, like, subscribe, and share with other people who you think might enjoy these episodes too. Until next time, stay happy.